It began with a flea. It ended with entire cities silent. In just a few years, a single invisible enemy rewrote the rules of life, faith, and power. This is the story of the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in human history. Picture a crowded medieval market. Spice sellers are shouting their prices. Church bells are ringing in the distance. Children are playing in the narrow cobblestone streets. No one knows that by the next harvest, half the faces in this crowd will be gone. The Black Death wasn't just a disease. It was a shockwave that moved through homes, churches, palaces, and slums with the same brutal, indiscriminate speed. It cared nothing for rank or title. It came quietly, and when it arrived, it changed everything. So, how did it start? The origin lies along the great arteries of trade that crossed Central Asia. Caravans carried precious silk, fragrant spices, and delicate porcelain, but they also carried stowaways, rats. On those rats lived fleas, and inside those fleas lived a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, the perfect assassin, hiding in the very seams of prosperity. As global trade grew, so did the reach of this tiny microbe. First, it spread across the vast steppes, then through bustling oases and ancient cities. Finally, it boarded ships bound for the Mediterranean. In the autumn of 1347, a handful of Genoese merchant vessels limped into the Sicilian port of Messina. What the dockworkers saw felt like a scene from a nightmare. The sailors were either dying or already dead, their bodies marked by strange, dark swellings. Terrified, the authorities ordered the death ships back out to sea. But it was too late. The damage was done. Rats, unseen, had already scurried down the mooring ropes and onto the docks. Fleas found new hosts. The plague had stepped onto European soil. What did this sickness actually look like? It often began like a common fever. Chills, exhaustion, a throbbing ache in the limbs. Then came the telltale sign. A hard, painful swelling in the groin, armpit, or neck. This was the infamous bubo. It swelled to the size of an egg, then an apple, turning a deep, bruised violet and black. For some victims, the infection spread to their lungs, causing them to cough up blood. Others developed black spots across their skin from internal bleeding, which is what gave the plague its name, the Black Death. Many died within 3 to 5 agonizing days. There was no reliable remedy, no herb strong enough, no prayer swift enough. For most, a diagnosis was a death sentence. The medicine of the day was completely unprepared. Physicians scrambled for answers, blaming everything from bad air, or miasma, carried on summer winds, to the alignment of the planets, to an imbalance of the body's humors. People burned incense and fragrant herbs, hoping to purify the air. They carried posies of flowers in their pockets. Priests called for mass repentance, believing the plague was divine punishment for humanity's sins. Astrologers drew complex charts, looking for answers in the stars. But every theory arrived too late. Every remedy failed. The plague spread with terrifying speed. It moved like a storm front, following the well-worn paths of trade. From Sicily, it swept through the Italian mainland. From the powerful port cities of Genoa and Venice, it jumped to Marseille and Barcelona. It traveled up the Rhone River to Paris, and then across the English Channel to England. It followed the trade routes of the Hanseatic League into the Baltic. Wherever goods moved, rats moved. Wherever people gathered, in markets, in churches, in homes, fleas fed. And every flea bite was a roll of loaded dice. Imagine what daily life became. Imagine leaving your home at dawn to fetch bread and having to step over a cart piled high with the bodies of your neighbors. Imagine finding the baker's shop shuttered, the priest gone, the midwife missing. In many places, the bell towers fell silent because the bell ringers themselves had died. There weren't enough living people to dig graves for the dead. Bodies were stacked in massive pits and covered with quicklime. Families sealed themselves indoors, marking their doors with crude crosses. "God have mercy" was scrawled on shutters in chalk. The world outside the window had become an apocalypse. Fear needs a target, and in the chaos, societies turned on themselves. In many towns and cities, minorities, particularly Jewish communities, were accused of poisoning wells to spread the disease. Horrific pogroms erupted. Thousands of innocent people were tortured and murdered, while the true killer, carried by fleas, kept moving, completely unaffected. Elsewhere, desperation took other forms. Processions of flagellants snaked through the streets, men whipping their own backs until they bled, hoping to atone for humanity's sins and appease an angry God. Huge bonfires were lit in public squares to cleanse the air. People culled cats and dogs by the thousands, mistakenly believing they spread the sickness, which only worsened the rat problem. These were all rituals born of sheer terror. None of them offered any real safety. The scale of the devastation is hard to comprehend. The city of Florence may have lost over half of its population. In some English shires, entire villages simply vanished from the tax rolls, their inhabitants wiped out. At the plague's peak in Paris, it's said that hundreds died every single day. Ships were found drifting into harbors, their entire crews dead, becoming floating coffins. The social order collapsed. In households, servants and masters died within hours of each other. The plague made no bargains and respected no boundaries. The Black Death was democratic in its cruelty. It took the rich and the poor, the powerful and the meek. Princess Joan of England, daughter of King Edward III, died from the plague on her way to Spain for her own wedding. Queen Eleanor of Aragon fell ill and never recovered. King Alfonso XIII of Castile perished while besieging Gibraltar. The famous poet Petrarch mourned the loss of Laura, the woman who had inspired his greatest verses, taken by the pestilence. Monasteries were emptied. Entire chapters of clergy vanished because they chose to stay and minister to the dying, exposing themselves directly to the disease. The registry of the living turned brittle, filled with blank spaces where names should have been. But why did some survive? Even in the hardest-hit neighborhoods, some doors remained untouched. Some people cared for the sick and never fell ill themselves. We now theorize that certain genetic factors may have offered protection to a lucky few. But to the people living through it, survival felt like a random act of God, a coin toss blessed by Providence. Survivors walked out into a silent, transformed world. A world with fewer people, but also a world where the old rules were broken. Laborers were suddenly in demand and could ask for higher wages. Peasants found new freedoms. The unquestioned authority of the church and the nobility had been shaken to its core. The Black Death didn't just kill, it forced a radical reset of European society. It was a brutal, horrifying chapter in human history, but its echoes helped shape the world we live in today. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'll see you in the next one.